SV. In your last Q&A, you spoke about the question of deserving being in a cult. This brought to mind the question of whether any person deserves, quote unquote, contracting COVID or deserves dealing with the after effects of COVID. I'm asking for personal reasons. I have a family member who has been belligerent, even hostile, regarding mask wearing, social distancing, listening to scientists and doctors, etc. She contracted COVID last year and was extremely ill for a few weeks. Since then, she can no longer smell or taste. She still has doubled down that COVID is a conspiracy brought about by the Democratic Party in collusion with China. I'm having a very hard time being sympathetic with her, and honestly, I have felt like she deserved being so ill, and she now deserves the after effects. Do you feel the same way about this situation? I.e., does no one deserve to suffer in this way? Just curious. I'm not proud of my feelings, and I'm trying to be more compassionate. All right, thank you very much for this question. This is a rough one, isn't it? It's tough. Because you do want to be compassionate. You do want to be empathetic even. You want to see the world through other people's eyes. You want to understand how they're viewing things. This is something I struggle with and work on all the time. Constantly thinking about this, putting myself in other people's shoes and looking at the world from their perspective, trying to understand and trying to therefore see how I might better relate with them, or how, we might be able to work things out where we have strong disagreements, even violent disagreements. So I think this is why it has some use to try to figure this kind of stuff out. Now, when I talked about people not deserving to be, abused or violently acted on, gaslighted, etc., as part of being in a destructive cult, it's because no one signs up for that ever, right? They don't have informed consent before they get involved. If you were to ask me whether a Catholic or Christian monk up in some monastery up in the mountains deserves to be freezing all night because they don't have any central heating and the windows are open or something and some storm comes through, and I don't know, whatever, does he deserve to be up there suffering? Well, yeah, because I know that the process of becoming a monk in a monastery is grueling, and they tell you everything beforehand about what your life and schedule and the expectations and responsibilities are going to be before you get involved. You understand exactly what the conditions are going to be. You even live through the process for a little while. They give you, a testing time, as I understand it. And maybe this isn't with every single monastery. I'm just saying, I've heard about this and read about it. And they are actively discouraging people from trying to become part of it unless they are absolutely committed to the process. Now, the reason I bring this up is this sort of like, where I'm going with this is that here is somebody who actually understands that they are entering into a life of servitude and abuse and punishment, and they want it. They embrace it. That is what I want to do. Good. Knock yourself out, right? Yeah, you deserve that. Because you asked for it, and you were exposed beforehand to the whole thing, so you guys get my point. No one went into a cult situation expecting what happened to them. They didn't deserve that. Okay, so with COVID now, we have a couple different similar factors at play, right? Where you have an illness or disease that no one has a choice as to whether they are going to or are not going to contract a virus, and whether that virus is going to, what kind of havoc it's going to play with their immune system and with their body. That's all out of your hands. What you do have the power of choice over and the power of control and responsibility for with yourself is what you do to protect yourself and protect other people. This is what health and safety guidelines are all about. And this is what the social contract is all about. So there are agreements that we all have entered into or were born into and understand through our civics classes in high school that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And we all rely on one another in order to get along. This social contract is not bullshit. This is a real thing. We all have this sort of unspoken agreement that we are going to get along and we're going to mutually help one another. And that's the way we've organized our society. And while we have our momentary ups and downs and tiffs with one another, we need to keep the social contract very clearly in mind at all times. And a lot of people seem to think they're exempt from it, or it doesn't apply to them, or they don't have to pay attention to social guidelines and rules or the law or safety guidelines because it doesn't matter because they don't agree. Well, that ain't how society works, and that's not how this contract works. And that is where another factor comes into play here in this calculation of deserving, which is kind of the very fundamental factor of tit for tat, right? That this is one of the most essential equations of life is give and take, even exchange, back and forth. I do this, you do this. I do this, you do this. And we're even Steven with one another. And if we're not even Steven, you need to work or I need to work to make us even Steven. Because that's how life operates. It's so fundamental. You can break down almost every single moral argument down to this kind of a tit for tat equation. Is there a balance? Have we found a balance? Has that been achieved? And when you have a bunch of people or an individual, let's say this person you're talking about, this family member, stepping out and violating all these rules, just screw it. I don't have to do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't need to do that. None of that's important to me. I don't care about any of you people, right? Whether it's paying taxes, whether it's wearing a mask, whether it's following the law, whether it's driving properly, all of these things apply. These principles I'm talking about apply. This is how we're supposed to live our life. These are the supposed tos that we all live with. And when somebody steps out of and away from those supposed tos, they're stepping out of that equation of balance where, I give, you give, I give, you give. They're like, no, I'm just taking, and I'm not going to give anything. I'm just going to take and take and take and take because I deserve to have everything given to me, or I deserve to have my way every time. Right? It's always my way. If it's not my way, it's the highway. Off you go. Right? That kind of person always pisses us off. It always rankles, right? Because they're violating the agreements. And we're not. We're following it, and they're not. What the hell? Right? And this is what gets us really ironed up. And so when somebody, then suffers the consequences of their actions, you can draw a direct straight line between what they did and the consequence. They didn't wear a mask. They walked around breathing on other people or letting other people breathe on them, carefree, during a pandemic, and think that it's there's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. It does matter. People have died because of the irresponsibility of individuals that you're talking about. And so when they become the adverse effect of their own, that when they suffer the consequences of their own actions, we are like, yay. And the reason that we feel that is that tit for tat, right? We're doing our part. They're not doing theirs. And so when they have adverse consequences as a result of not doing theirs, we call that justice. Right? We call that karma. We call that fate. We got lots of words for this. Kismet, right? Just rewards. They got what was coming to them. I'm sure there's millions of phrases and language for this, but it all comes back down to that tit for tat equation. So having explained all of this moral philosophy of mine, where I'm coming back down to is, yeah, I understand the righteous feeling of they deserved it, and when you can trace it back to, that person's actions, then yeah, they deserved it. They were fully informed of the consequences of their actions, and they went ahead anyway. And to the degree that people like that don't take responsibility, don't own their actions, don't accept the consequences of their actions, the tit for tat equation goes further and further out of balance, right? They're more and more irresponsible about it. They're less and less in agreement, in harmony with the rest of the group and what it's trying to achieve. So so this is where we get these divisions where eventually they might, just break away entirely if we can't reel them in or deal with them and get them to see sense or sensibility or rationality. So that's sort of my, formulaic thinking kind of behind the picture of what's going on there in terms of why I would say, yeah, they kind of deserve it, and I don't say that from a position of harsh judgment either. I'm not mad at this person. I don't even know who this person is, right? That is being asked about in the question. I have no idea. So from that distance, I can sort of be a little bit more formulaic and less context specific. Maybe if I were to learn all the specifics and all the context of that particular individual situations, I might find reasons to excuse some of their behavior, or might find reasons to mitigate my judgment of it, right? So, individual perspective always is in play here, and we can always moderate or mediate our position on this stuff. So I'm not trying to give absolute formulaic reasons to hate people here. I'm trying to explain the reasoning in my mind as to why it is that I would say that, yeah, people who violate health and safety rules and guidelines get what's coming to them. And I can't feel sorry for people who go way out of their way to know better than trained professionals when it comes to our health. I'm sorry, but I just can't really go there. Are doctors always right? Are epidemiologists always right? No, but they're more right about their profession and their professional expertise than you are. That's why they're the professionals and you are not. And this matters. This stuff is important. So anyway, probably going on too much here, but those are my thoughts on your question. I feel like I can feel compassionate and even empathetic towards somebody who contracts COVID, has after effects of it. That sucks. I am not happy that person is in that situation. It doesn't make me feel satisfied that person contracted COVID or has after effects from it, right? That's not what I mean when I say they deserve it. What I mean when I say they deserve it is they did things that make them responsible for that situation. They opened themselves up to it when they were told not to and given very good reasons not to. So there's a certain point along the line there where, yeah, it's on them. There you go.